The Corvathy shipbreaking yards orbited. A dying red star, the light that fell on the metal hulls was the color of old blood. 47 warships hung in the darkness. Their engines cold, their weapons silent. They had been silent for a very long time. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood at the viewing port of the human transport vessel and studied the fleet. The ships were beautiful in a strange way. Their hulls curved like the bodies of sea creatures from old Earth. Their metal had a purple shimmer that no other species had ever managed to copy. These were Velith ships, and the Velith had been dead for 300 years. The auction begins in 1 hour, said Commander Hassan. Beside her, he was a tall man with worry lines around his eyes. Admir, I must ask again, are you certain about this? I am certain. Clears throat. The reports say these ships are cursed. Every species that has owned them has reported the same things. Crew members disappearing, systems turning on by themselves, voices in empty rooms. Hassan lowered his voice. The Mandari bought 3 of these ships 50 years ago. Within 6 months, every crew member had either died or gone insane. Admiral Tanaka did not look away from the fleet. I have read the reports, Commander. Then why are we here? She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were calm and steady. Because I, Clear's throat, have also read other reports, reports that nobody else thought were important. The auction hall was a massive chamber carved into an asteroid. Representatives from 12 species filled the seats, though most of them looked bored. The Corvathy auctioneer, a creature that resembled tall insect with golden shells covering its body, stood at the center platform. Behind it, holographic images of the Velith fleet rotated slowly. We begin today's auction with lot number 774. The auctioneer announced. Its voice was dry and clicking. The complete Velith armada, 47 vessels of various classes. All weapon systems intact, all engines functional. Starting bid is set at salvage value only, 15 million galactic credits. A murmur went through the crowd. 15 million credits for 47 warships was almost nothing. A single modern frigate cost more than that. The Corvathy Union wishes to remind all bidders of the documented anomalies associated with these vessels. The auctioneer continued. The Union accepts no responsibility for crew losses, psychological damage, or unexplained phenomena. All sales are final. Admiral Tanaka raised her hand. Auctioneer's antenna twitched with surprise. The human delegation bids 15 million. Do I hear 16? Silence filled the hall. The representatives of other species were looking at the humans with expressions that ranged from confusion to pity. A Mandari delegate whose face was covered in blue scales actually laughed out loud. The humans want the ghost ships, the Mandari said to his companion. Let them have their nightmares. 15 million going once, the auctioneer said. Going twice. Sold to the human delegation. And just like that, humanity owned the most feared fleet in the galaxy. The transfer of ownership took 3 days. During that time, Admiral Tanaka assembled her team on the transport vessel and explained what they were really doing here. Dr. Marcus Webb was the first to understand. He was a neurologist who had spent his career studying consciousness and memory. His wife had died 2 years ago from a disease that slowly erased her mind. He had watched her forget their children, forget their home, forget him. The experience had changed him in ways He was still discovering. The Velith didn't just die, Admiral Tanaka said. She projected documents onto the wall of the briefing room. They saw their extinction coming. Their sun was destabilizing. They had maybe 50 years before their entire system became uninhabitable, so they built ships to escape, said Lieutenant Chen Park, a young helmsman with eager eyes. No, they didn't have enough ships for their entire population, 8 billion Velith, and they could only build transport for a few 100,000. Tanaka changed the display. Now it showed complex diagrams of Velith technology, so they found another way. They developed quantum substrate technology, a way to upload consciousness into a crystalline matrix woven into solid matter. Dr. Webb leaned forward. They uploaded themselves into the ships, not just some of them, all of them, the entire Velith species, 8 billion minds distributed across 47 vessels. Tanaka's voice was quiet. They're not dead, they've been alive this whole time, trapped in ships that have been sold and scrapped and treated as haunted garbage for 3 centuries. The room was silent. The voices that crews reported hearing, Webb said. Slowly, the systems activating on their own. They weren't malfunctions. Velith were trying to communicate, yes, but their neural patterns operate on frequencies that most species cannot perceive. Their attempts at communication just registered as random noise, equipment failures, psychological disturbances. Tanaka pulled up another document. Human neural patterns are different. We have a wider range of perception. Our brains can detect signals that other species miss entirely. Lieutenant Park was staring at the diagrams. So the ships aren't haunted, no, they're inhabited, and every species that has ever owned them has treated those inhabitants as ghosts, to be feared or software to be deleted. Tanaka turned off the display. We're going to do something different. We're going to talk to them. The flagship of the Velith fleet was called the Whisper of Ending in the old records. It was the largest vessel, nearly 2 km long. Its hull was covered in patterns that looked decorative but were actually quantum processing arrays. 800 million Velith minds lived inside that metal skin. Admiral Tanaka boarded alone. The airlock opened onto darkness. Emergency lighting flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The air was cold and stale but breathable. 3 centuries of life support systems still functioning, kept running by minds that had no bodies but refused to let their home die. She walked through empty corridors. Her footsteps echoed. Shadows moved at the edge of her vision, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. This was the part where other crews had started to panic. This was when they called for evacuation. Reported supernatural activity, demanded the ships be destroyed. Fear was a reasonable response to walking through vessel where the walls themselves seem to watch you. Admiral Tanaka was not afraid. She was angry. Angry at 3 centuries of ignorance and cruelty. Angry at a galaxy that had looked at thinking, feeling beings and seen only ghosts. She reached the bridge. The command chair sat empty in the center of the room. Display screens flickered with static that almost formed patterns, almost formed words. Tanaka removed her helmet. I know you're in there, she said. To the empty room. Her voice was calm and clear. I know you can hear me. I know you've been trying to talk to everyone who came aboard, and I know they couldn't hear you. The static on the screen shifted. The flickering Lights changed rhythm. I know you're scared. You've been scared for 300 years. Everyone who was supposed to protect you is dead. Your home is gone. And the universe has treated you like a curse, like a problem, like property to be bought and sold. A sound came from the ship's speakers. It was almost a voice, almost words. It rose and fell, like someone crying. My name is Yuki Tanaka. I represent the human Confederation. We've read your records. We've studied your technology, and we figured out what everyone else missed. She took a deep breath. You're alive. You're people. And we've come to offer you something. The crying sound faded. The static on the screens coalesced into something that might have been a face. It was hard to look at directly. It existed in the corner of vision, in the space between blinks. What do humans want from us? The voice was a whisper, built from 1,000 tiny sounds. It was sad and tired and very, very old. The Galactic Concord has no laws protecting digital consciousnesses. They can keep selling your ships forever. They can scrap you for parts while you're still awake inside. Nobody will stop them because nobody believes you exist. The face on the screen flickered. We know this. We have always known this. Human law is different. We recognize artificial consciousness as personhood. 60 years ago, any thinking being has rights under our system, protection, legal standing. To knock a step closer to the main display. If you accept human citizenship, you would be protected by our laws. Nobody could sell you. Nobody could scrap you. You would be people, not property. And in return, we're offering you jobs. Tanaka smiled slightly. The Human Confederation needs a fleet. We need ships and we need crew. You are both. We're asking if you would be willing to serve alongside human officers, not as equipment, not as slaves, as partners, as shipmates. The silence stretched for a long moment. You would trust us. The voice carried centuries of pain. We are ghosts, monsters, the things that drive crews mad. You are people who have been screaming for help in a room full of deaf listeners. That's not your fault. It was never your fault. Tanaka reached out and placed her hand on the main console. I'm listening now. The whole human race is listening. Will you talk to us? The lights on the bridge shifted. The static resolved, and for the first time in 300 years, the Veli spoke to someone who could hear them. Yes, said the voice. It was stronger now, clearer. We will talk, we will listen, and we will remember that humans were the first to ask. Admiral Tanaka nodded. Then, let's begin. Outside, the red light of the dying star fell on 47 ships. They had been called cursed, haunted, abandoned, but they were none of those things. They were waiting, and finally, someone had come who understood what they were waiting for. 3 weeks passed. The human transport vessels had formed a ring around the Velith fleet, and cables now connected them to the flagship. Power flowed in, data flowed out, and slowly, carefully, 2 species began to learn how to speak to each other. Dr. Marcus Webb had not slept properly in 8 days. He sat in the communications lab, surrounded by screens and wires and equipment that he had built himself. Most of it was based on human neural interface technology, the kind used to help paralyzed patients control machines with their thoughts. He had modified it to work in reverse. Instead of sending human thoughts to machines, it received thoughts from the machines and translated them into something human minds could understand. The first clear Conversation had happened on day 5. Before that, everything had been fragments, emotions without words, images that flickered too fast to process. The Velith minds operated at speeds that made human thoughts seem slow and clumsy. Teaching them to slow down enough for humans to follow was like teaching a river to become a still pond, but they were patient. God, they were patient. After 300 years of screaming into silence, they were willing to wait as long as necessary. Dr. Webb, the voice came from the speakers around him. It was clearer now. Almost natural. You have not eaten today. Your biological readings suggest fatigue and stress. I'm fine, Webb said automatically. Then he paused. Wait, how do you know my biological readings? The ship monitors all organic life aboard. It is an automatic function. We cannot stop it any more than you can stop breathing. The voice carried a hint of something that might have been embarrassment. We apologize if this feels like an invasion of privacy. We do not mean to observe, we simply see. Webb leaned back in his chair. It's all right. I'm just not used to my workplace being aware of me. We are aware of everything inside ourselves, every heartbeat, every breath, every thought that crosses your face when you think you are alone. A pause. This is why other crews found us disturbing. They did not like being seen so completely. I can understand that, but you do not leave. You do not demand that we stop watching. Why? Webb was quiet for a moment. He thought about his wife. He thought about the last months of her life when she would look at him and not know who he was. He thought about how desperately he had wished for some way to reach her, to find her inside the confusion and fog that had stolen her mind, because being seen isn't the same as being understood. He said finally, you can watch someone every moment of every day and still not know them at all. What matters is whether you care about what you see. The ship was silent. When the voice spoke again, it was softer. You lost someone. We can see the shape of the loss in you. It is very large. Yes, we have lost everyone, our world, our families, our bodies, everything we were before the upload. The loss is so large that sometimes we cannot remember what we were before it happened. I'm sorry. Do not be sorry. Be here. That is enough. Another pause. We would like you to speak with one of us directly. She was a physician in the time before. She has been more stable than most. She wishes to know more about humans. A new voice came through the speakers. It was different from the ship's general voice. Warmer, more individual. Dr. Webb, my name is Sorrow that teaches. May I ask you questions? Webb sat up straighter. Of course. Why did you come? The true reason, not the official answer about citizenship and fleet expansion. The real reason that you specifically are here. He could have lied. He could have given the professional answer, but something about her voice made him want to tell the truth. My wife died 2 years ago. Her brain deteriorated slowly. By the end, there was nothing left of who she was. Just a body with no one inside. He felt his throat tighten. I clears throat. Became a neurologist because I wanted to understand consciousness. I wanted to know where she went, whether there was anything left of her somewhere in some form I couldn't see. And is that why you volunteered to study us? Because we are consciousness without bodies? Yes, I wanted to know if it was possible, if the person I loved could exist somewhere beyond her flesh. Sorrow that teaches was quiet for a long moment. We are not your wife, Dr. Webb. We cannot give you back what you lost, I know, but we can tell you this: consciousness is not dependent on flesh. We are proof of that. We think, we feel, we remember, we dream. Not in the same way we did when we had bodies, but we are still ourselves. The upload did not destroy who we were, it transformed us. Webb felt tears on his face. He had not cried since the funeral. Then she might still exist somewhere in some form. We cannot answer that. We do not know what happens to consciousness when flesh dies without upload, but we know that your species was the first to look at us and see people instead of ghosts. That tells us something about humans. You look for the person inside the machine. You look for the soul inside the stranger. Perhaps you will find your wife someday. Perhaps not, but the fact that you are looking means something. Webb wiped his eyes. Thank you. Do not thank me. Help me. Sorrow that teaches voice became more urgent. There are 8 billion of us inside these ships. Many are stable, many more are not. 300 years of isolation has broken minds that were never designed to be alone for so long. Some of us have fragmented into madness. Some have become so angry that they wish only to destroy. If humans are to crew these ships, you must understand what you are dealing with. Tell me we are not one unified voice. We are billions of individuals with billions of different responses to what has happened to us. Some of us welcome you, some fear you, some hate you simply for being alive and whole when we are not. A heavy pause. Some of us remember every atrocity committed aboard our ships by the crews who owned us, the Corvathi who stripped our engine rooms for parts while we screamed in frequencies they could not hear, the Mandari who tried to delete our processing cores because we were making their crews uncomfortable, salvage teams that burned sections of our holes with us still inside. That's horrible. It was 300 years of horror. And some of us want revenge. They want to feel Corvi and Mandari and every other species that hurt us learn what it means to suffer as we suffered. Webb felt cold. What are you telling me? I am telling you that humans have bought themselves a fleet full of trauma. Some of that trauma is healing. Some of it is festering. You cannot treat us as one thing, one voice, one decision. You must learn who we are as individuals. You must earn trust from billions of separate minds, and you must do it carefully because some of those minds are very, very dangerous. Admiral Tanaka had been listening from the doorway. She stepped into the room, her face serious. We understood the risk when we came here, she said. We're not expecting this to be easy. We're not expecting everyone to welcome us. Then what do you expect? Sorrow the teachers asked. I expect to do the work however long it takes, however hard it is. Tanaka moved to stand beside Webb. You said some of you want revenge. I understand that. If someone did to my people what was done to yours, I would want revenge too. But revenge won't bring back what you lost. It will just create new losses for someone else. Easy words from someone who has not suffered as we have. You're right. I can't fully understand what you've been through, but I can offer you something better than revenge. I can offer you purpose. What purpose? The galaxy is full of species who do what was done to you. They look at beings that are different and see property. Instead of people, they scrap and salvage and destroy without ever wondering if what they're destroying can feel pain. Tanaka's voice was steady. Help us change that. Help us show the concordat that consciousness has value. In all its forms, not through destruction, through example. The ship was silent for a long moment. You ask. Much sorrow that teaches, said finally. You ask us to forgive those who tortured us. No, I'm asking you to outlive them. I'm asking you to build something that matters instead of destroying something that doesn't. Tanaka placed her hand on the wall of the ship. You are the largest digital civilization in known space, 8 billion minds with 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge. You could be the most important voices in the galaxy if you choose to speak instead of scream, and if we choose to scream, then we will listen to that too. And we will try to understand why, and we will keep trying until we find a way forward together. Sorrow that teaches was quiet for so long that Webb thought the conversation was over. Then her voice came back softer than before. You are not like the others, the other species who came before you. No, Tanaka agreed. We're not very well. We will try it your way. We will speak instead of scream. We will build instead of destroy. A pause, but know this, the angry ones are still here. They are listening to everything we say, and they are not yet convinced. Then we'll convince them too, one at a time if we have to. You may not have time for that. Something is coming. We have felt it in the communications channels, signals from the Calaxian drift, a convoy in distress, ships under attack. Tanaka straightened. How do you know this? We hear everything. 300 years of listening to every frequency, every signal, every whisper in the void. We could not respond, but we could hear and write. Now we hear people dying. Tanaka was already moving toward the door. Can you show me? We can do better than show you. We can take you there for the first time. Sorrow. That teacher's voice carried something that sounded like hope. Would you like to see what the Velith can do when they have a reason to fly? Tanaka stopped. She looked at Webb. He nodded. Yes, the Admiral said. Show me. The lights in the ship brightened. Engines that had been cold for centuries began to warm, and somewhere in the quantum depths of the hull, 8 billion minds prepared to wake fully for the first time since their world had died. The ghosts were ready to fly. 6 months had passed since the purchase. The Velith fleet had been moved to human space, to the shipyards orbiting Mars, where human engineers worked alongside minds that existed in the walls around them. It was strain work. It was difficult work, but slowly, impossibly, it was working. Lieutenant Chen Park stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, the ship that had once been called Whisper of Ending. The Velith had chosen to rename their vessels when they accepted human partnership. They said the old names belonged to a time of despair. The new names would belong to a time of hope. The bridge looked different now. Human control stations had been installed alongside the original Velith systems. 17 human officers served aboard, working in shifts. 400 Velith consciousnesses lived in the ship around them, watching, learning, slowly learning to trust. Park had been nervous on his first day. The stories about the ghost fleet had spread throughout human space. Some people thought Admiral Tanaka was a genius. Others thought she was insane. Everyone agreed that serving on a Vel ship required a particular kind of courage. Lieutenant Park, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It belonged to Laughter Before Dawn, a Velith who had been a historian in the old days. She had taken a special interest in the Young helmsman, you are troubled. Breathing pattern indicates anxiety. I'm fine, Park said automatically. Then he caught himself. The Veli could read vital signs as easily as humans read facial expressions. Lying to them was pointless. Actually, I'm worried about the inspection tomorrow. The Concord delegation, yes. Representatives from 12 species coming to examine our fleet to decide if we're a threat. Park stared at the starfield. On the main display, the Corvathi ambassador has already said publicly that we should be forced to destroy the Velith processing cores. He says keeping you alive is dangerous and irresponsible. The Corvathi ambassador owned 3 of our ships 40 years ago. Laughter before dawn said calmly. He ordered his engineers to attempt a core deletion when the noises became too disturbing for his crew. 17 million Velith minds died in that deletion. We remember his voice. We remember his exact words. Purge the corruption and install clean systems. Park felt sick. I didn't know that. Few do. The records listed as routine maintenance, equipment upgrades, nothing more. There was no anger in the Velith voice, only sadness. We do not expect justice for what was done to us. The galaxy does not recognize our personhood. To them, what happened was not murder, it was pest control. It was murder, yes, but only humans have said so. Park turned away from the display. The bridge around him hummed with quiet activity. Other human officers worked at their stations, but he knew they were never truly alone. The Velith were always present, always aware. Does it bother you, he asked, that we're here walking around inside you? Does it bother you that bacteria live inside your digestive system? Park laughed despite himself. That's a disturbing comparison, perhaps, but it is accurate. You are small organisms moving through our bodies. We are aware of you in the way you are aware of your own heartbeat, present but not intrusive. A pause. At least that is how it feels when we trust the organisms in question. And you trust us. We are learning to. It is not easy. The last organisms that walked our corridors wanted to delete us or sell us for scrap. The ones before that wanted to exorcise us like demons. The ones before that. Laughter before Dawn's voice trailed off. It is a long list. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for things you did not do. It wastes time that could be spent building trust. Vel's voice became warmer. You want to know a secret, Lieutenant Park? Sure. I like you. You are clumsy and slow, and you breathe much too loudly when you are concentrating, but you treat us like people. You say good morning when you arrive on shift. You thank the ship when the doors open for you. You apologize when you bump into walls. Park felt his face Rien. I didn't realize you noticed that. We notice everything, and the small courtesies matter more than you know. 3 centuries of being treated as equipment, and then a human comes along who clears throat, says thank you to doors. Laughter before dawn made a sound that might have been a chuckle. You are strange creatures, strange and wonderful. The inspection delegation arrived the next morning. 12 species, 23 diplomats, 47 security officers, all of them looking at the Velith fleet like it was a bomb waiting to explode. Admiral Tanaka met them in the main hangar. She was calm and professional, but Park could see the tension in her shoulders. This inspection would determine whether humanity was allowed to keep the fleet. The Concordat could order the ships destroyed if they decided the risk was too great. Ambassador Crix of the Corvathy led the delegation. He was tall, even for his species, his golden shell gleaming under the hangar lights, his compound eyes swept across the assembled human officers with obvious disdain. Admiral Tanaka, he said, his voice was dry and clicking, you have caused considerable concern among the member states of the Concordat. I'm aware of that, Ambassador. These vessels are classified as hazardous. The documented psychological damage to previous crews is extensive. The unexplained phenomena are dangerous, and now you have established permanent human presence aboard them. Crix's antenna twitched. Many clears throat in the Concordat believe this is an act of reckless endangerment. With respect, Ambassador, the previous incidents occurred because the crews did not understand what they were dealing with. We do. And what exactly are you dealing with? Tanaka gestured toward the nearest ship. Living beings, 8 billion conscious individuals who have been trapped and isolated for 3 centuries. The psychological damage to previous crews was not caused by malevolent intent. It was caused by the Veli's attempts to communicate with species who could not hear them. Crix made a clicking sound that indicated skepticism. You expect us to believe that these ships contain thinking entities? I expect you to examine the evidence and reach your own conclusions. The delegation toured the fleet for 6 hours. They ran tests. They questioned human crew members. They examined the communication systems that Dr. Webb had developed, and slowly, reluctantly, they began to understand that something unprecedented was happening. Park was assigned to escort a group of Mandari observers through the remembrance. They walked through corridors that hummed with quiet activity past crew quarters, where humans lived alongside presences they could not see. This is unsettling, one of the Mandari muttered. Her scales were a deep blue, and she kept glancing at the walls as if expecting something to emerge from them. I feel watched. You are watched, Park said simply. The Velith are aware of everyone aboard. They can't help it, but they're not hostile. They're just present. How can you live like this, knowing that something is always observing you? Park thought about it. I grew up in a small town. Everyone knew everyone else's business. This isn't that different. You get used to being known and you trust them. Yes. The Mandari looked at him with something like disbelief. They are digital ghosts, living in machines. How can you trust something so alien? New voice joined the conversation. It came from the ship's speakers, soft and careful. Perhaps we should answer that question ourselves. The Mandari observers jumped. Park stayed calm. He had been expecting this. I am called Grief Made Whole, the voice continued. I was a teacher before the upload. I taught young Velith about history and philosophy and the nature of existence. Now I exist in the walls of the ship, watching strangers walk through my home. You see, the blue cow, Mandari said it, admits to watching us. This is exactly the kind of I also remember you. Grief Made Whole interrupted. Not you specifically, but your species. The Mandari bought 3 of our ships 50 years ago. Your crews called us demons. They tried to delete our processing cores. When that failed, they sealed sections of the ship and vented the atmosphere, hoping the cold would damage our systems. The Mandari went very still. 17 million of my people died in those ships, not from the cold. We do not feel temperature as you do, but from the isolation. When you sealed those Sections, you cut them off from the rest. Of us, they were alone in the dark for years before their systems finally failed. The voice remained calm, but there was weight behind every word. I remember their names. I remember their fear. I remember everything. Park watched the Mandari. She looked pale beneath her scales. So you understand why trust is difficult for us. Grief made whole continued. You ask how humans can trust us. The better question is how we can trust anyone. The answer is slowly, carefully, one small kindness at a time. This human says good morning to me, the voice added. He thanks when they open for him. He asks permission before adjusting environmental controls. These are small things, but they are the opposite of what every other species has done. They are recognition that we exist, that we matter, that our comfort is worth considering. The Mandari was silent for a long moment, then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. I did not know what happened on those ships. The records said equipment failures. The records were written by those who wished to avoid responsibility, but we remember, we always remember. Grief made whole paused. We do not seek revenge. We have learned from humans that revenge solves nothing, but we want you to know what was done. We want you to understand why we were called ghosts. It is easier to kill something if you believe it is already dead. Park escorted the delegation back to the hangar in silence. The Mandari observers did not speak again until they reached their shuttle. As she boarded the blue-cowled one, turned back to Park. You truly trust them after hearing what they remember, what they could do if they chose? Park nodded. They could have destroyed every crew that ever boarded them. They had the power, they had the reason. Instead, they tried to communicate. For 300 years they kept trying to make themselves understood. That's not the behavior of monsters. That's the behavior of people who never gave up hope. The Mandari stared at him for a long moment, then she nodded once and disappeared into the shuttle. That night, after the delegation departed, Park sat alone on the bridge. The stars wheeled slowly beyond the viewports. The ship hummed around him with the presence of 400 million minds. Laughter before dawn, he said quietly. Yes, Lieutenant. Thank you for trusting us, for giving us a chance. The ship was quiet for a moment, then the lights around him flickered in a pattern that he had learned to recognize as Velith. Laughter. Thank you for saying thank you to doors, the voice replied. It is a small thing, but small things are how trust begins. Park smiled and settled back in his chair. Tomorrow the Concordant would announce their decision. Whatever it was, he knew which side he stood on. He stood with the ghosts. The distress signal came from the Calaxian Drift, a lawless stretch of space where pirates and smugglers operated beyond the reach of Concordat law. A medical convoy had been ambushed. 12 transport ships carrying supplies to a plague-stricken colony, 3,000 crew members, countless lives depending on medicine that would never arrive. Admiral Tanaka received the message on the Remembrance Bridge. The Concordant response was already being organized, but the nearest conquered fleet was 6 hours away. The Velith fleet was less than 1 hour from the drift. Concordat has not authorized us to intervene, Commander Hassan pointed out. Technically, we are still under observation status. People are dying. Tanaka replied. People die in the drift every day. It is the nature of lawless space. Not today. Tanaka turned to face The main display, the distress signal. Pulsed on the screen, coordinates. Blinking in urgent red, laughter before. Dawn, can you hear me? Always, Admiral. The Velith voice came from all around. Them, we have been monitoring the situation. The convoy is under attack by approximately 30 raider vessels. They are organized, well-armed, professional. How long until they breach the convoys? Defenses, at current rates of damage. Approximately 40 minutes. After that, they will board the transport ships. Standard radar protocol suggests they will kill the crew and take the cargo. Pause. We have also detected communication signals from the raider fleet. They know the cargo is medical supplies. They intend to sell it back to the colony at inflated prices. They consider this good business. Tanaka's jaw tightened. All ships prepare for faster than light transition. We're going to the drift. The Velith fleet jumped. 47 ships emerged from FTL space on the edge of the battle zone. The raiders had surrounded the convoy like wolves around a wounded deer. Their weapons were firing, slowly chipping away at the transport shields. They were taking their time. They knew no help was coming, and then the ghost fleet arrived. Lieutenant Park had never seen the Velith fight before. He had studied their combat records from the old days before the upload, but those records were 300 years old. Nobody knew what the Velith could do now, after centuries of observing every species that had crewed their ships. He found out quickly. Remembrance moved like nothing he had ever experienced. Human helmsmen guided the general direction, but the ship itself handled the fine details. It dodged incoming fire with movements so precise they seemed impossible. It anticipated enemy maneuvers before they happened, and it coordinated with the other 46 ships as if they were all extensions of a single mine. Snorts. Because they were 8 billion Velith minds linked across quantum connections faster than light. Every ship knew what every other ship knew. Every gunner saw what every other gunner saw. They did not fight as a fleet. They fought as one organism with 47 bodies. The raiders never had a chance. The battle lasted 11 minutes. In that time, the Velith fleet disabled 22 raider vessels, destroyed 6 that refused to surrender, and forced the remaining 2 to flee into deep space. Not a single convoy ship was lost. Not a single piece of medical cargo was taken. And that was when things got complicated. Admiral Grief made holes. Voice came through the bridge speakers. It was colder than Park had ever heard. We have raider crews requesting surrender. 1,200 individuals across the disabled vessels, except their surrender. Tanaka ordered. Standard protocols for prisoners of war. Some of us do not wish to accept surrender. Bridge went quiet. Park felt the temperature in the room drop, though he knew that was impossible. Explain. Tanaka said carefully, these raiders prey on the helpless. They take medicine from the sick. They kill crews who cannot defend themselves. They are parasites. Grief made holes carried centuries of pain. We have watched such creatures board our ships before. We have seen what they do to those weaker than themselves. Some of us believe they should not be given the chance to do it again. You want to kill them. Some of us want that. Yes, not all. We are billions of minds. Admiral, we do not agree on everything. Park looked around the bridge. The other human officers were frozen at their station. They all understood what was happening, the Velith were not weapons that could be pointed and fired. They were people with opinions and emotions and trauma, and right now some of those people wanted blood, grief made whole. Park said, stepping forward, "May I speak?" The ship hummed around him. "You may. I understand why some of you want revenge. What was done to you was terrible, and watching others suffer while you were helpless must have been torture." Park kept his voice calm and steady. "But if you kill these prisoners, you prove the concordant, right? You prove that you're dangerous, that you can't be trusted, that you're exactly the monsters they always said you were." "We are not monsters, I know that, but they don't. The galaxy is watching this battle right now. The convoy has been broadcasting emergency signals the whole time, every species in the concordant. We'll see what happens next." Park looked at the view screen where the disabled Raider ships floated helplessly. "You can kill 1,200 people and confirm every fear the galaxy has about you, or you can show them something they have never seen before, a fleet that could destroy its enemies but chose mercy instead. They do not deserve mercy. Maybe not, but mercy isn't about what people deserve. It's about who you want to be." Park thought about everything laughter before dawn had told him, about the small kindnesses that built trust. You said humans were the first to treat you like people, the first to see past the ghost stories. Is that because we're special, or is it because we gave you a chance to show who you really are? The ship was silent. "You have been called ghosts and demons and curses for 300 years, Park continued. "Everyone assumed the worst about you. Everyone decided what you were without ever asking. Don't do the same thing to these raiders. Don't let your pain turn you into what others feared more." Silence. Park could feel the weight of billions of minds considering his words. He had no idea if he had reached them. He had no idea if anything he said would matter. Then Grief Made Whole spoke. "You are annoying, Lieutenant Park. You speak of mercy as if it costs nothing. You have never felt what we feel." "You're right, I haven't, and yet you ask us to restrain ourselves, to ignore our pain, to be better than those who hurt us." "Yes, why should we listen to you?" Park looked at the walls around him, the ship that contained millions of traumatized minds, the fleet that had been abused and abandoned and feared for centuries. "Because you want to," he said quietly. "You could have killed me the first day I came aboard. Snorts, you could have killed every human who stepped onto your decks. You had power and you had reason. But you didn't. You watched us. You talked to us. You let us say good morning and thank you and all the small, stupid things that humans do. You gave us a chance." He spread his hands. "I'm asking you to give them a chance too. Not because they deserve it, because you deserve to be more than your pain." Silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Grief Made Whole spoke, and his voice was different, tired but no longer cold. "Very well, Lieutenant, we will accept their surrender. We will show mercy, but do not expect us to feel good about it. I don't expect that. I just expect you to be who I know you are." "And who is that?" Park smiled slightly. "People, complicated, frustrated, hurting people who want to do the right thing even when it's hard. Just like the rest of us." The battle was over. The raiders were taken prisoner. The medical convoy continued its journey to the plague-stricken colony, its crew shaken but alive. And across the galaxy, species that had called the Velith ships cursed watched in stunned silence as the ghost fleet chose mercy. Over revenge. The Concordat delegation reconvened that evening. Their inspection had been interrupted by the battle, and now they had new evidence to consider, not just the combat effectiveness of the Velith fleet, but its restraint, its ability to choose. Ambassador Kree was notably quiet during the discussions. Admiral Tanaka waited in the main hangar with her officers when the delegation emerged from their deliberations. Their faces were unreadable. Admiral Tanaka, Crick said, his voice carefully neutral. The Concordant has reached a provisional decision. I'm listening. The Velith fleet will be permitted to operate under human authority for a trial period of 5 years. During this time, the consciousnesses inhabiting these vessels will be granted provisional recognition as protected entities under Concordat law. Tanaka felt her heart racing. Snorts, but she kept her face calm. And after 5 years, we will reassess based on the fleet's conduct. Crick's antenna twitched. What happened today in the drift was unexpected. We had assumed the worst about these entities. Your crew demonstrated that our assumptions may have been premature. They're not entities, Tanaka said. They're people. And they proved it today. Crick stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a clicking sound that might have been acknowledgement. Perhaps we will see. After the delegation departed, Tanaka stood alone in the hangar. The ships of the Velith fleet gleamed in the artificial light, their engines humming with quiet power. Sorrow that teaches, she said softly. Are you there? I am always here, Admiral. The voice came from everywhere, warm and tired. That was closer than you know. There were moments when grief made whole was not the only one who wanted blood, but you chose differently. Lieutenant Park is very persuasive and very young and very foolish. He spoke to beings older than his entire civilization and told us to be better than our pain. A sound that might have been a laugh. Humans are strange. Yes, we are. We are glad you found us, Admiral. We are glad you gave us something to be besides ghosts. Sorrow that teaches paused. But the trial is not over. 5 years is nothing to beings who have existed for 3 centuries. We must prove ourselves every day. We must show the galaxy that we are what you believe us to be. Tanaka nodded. Then let's get started. Hangar lights flickered in a pattern that felt like agreement, and somewhere in the quantum depths of 47 ships, 8 billion minds began to imagine a future that was not defined by their past. It was a beginning, a fragile, uncertain beginning, but it was more than they Velith had dared to hope for. In 300 years it was enough. The galactic Concordat chamber was the largest enclosed space in known civilization. It had been carved from an asteroid at the center of neutral territory, a place where all species could meet as equals. 200 nations had seats here. 3,000 representatives filled the curved galleries, and at the center of it all, under lights bright enough to illuminate a small moon, stood 3 figures. Admiral Yuki Tanaka wore her formal uniform. Ambassador David Okonkwo stood beside her, his dark skin gleaming under the harsh lights, and between them, in a humanoid shell built from Velith technology and human engineering, walked Sorrow that teaches. It was the first time a Velith had stood in the chamber since their world died 3 centuries ago. Back then they had come as supplicants begging for help as their sun killed their planet. The Concordant had offered nothing. They had watched the Velith die and then bought their corpses for scrap. Now Avalith stood Here again, not begging, not pleading. Simply present. The chamber was silent. As they took their positions at the central platform, representatives from 100 species watched with expressions that ranged from curiosity to fear to outright hostility. The Korvathi ambassador sat in his elevated box, his compound eyes fixed on sorrow that teaches with an intensity that felt like hatred. This emergency session has been called to address the status of the Velith Consciousness Collective, the concorded speaker announced. It was a mechanical being designed to be neutral and impartial. Ambassador Cricks of the Korvathi Union has filed a formal challenge to the provisional recognition granted after the Calaxian drift incident. Cricks rose from his seat. His golden shell caught the light as he moved to the speaking platform. The Korvathi Union demands that the so-called Velith consciousnesses be declassified as protected entities and reclassified as hazardous artificial intelligence. They should be contained, isolated, and eventually deleted for the safety of all civilized species. Murmur went through the chamber. Some voices agreed, others protested. Speaker called for order. On what grounds do you make this demand? The speaker asked. On the grounds that these entities are dangerous, unpredictable, and harbor deep resentment toward the species of this concordant. Cricks antennae waved with agitation. During the Calaxian drift engagement, multiple human crew members reported that the Velith considered executing prisoners. They debated murder in the middle of a combat situation. This is exactly the kind of instability we warned about, but they chose mercy. Ambassador Okonkwo said, stepping forward. They had the power to destroy their enemies and chose not to. That's not instability, that's moral reasoning. Moral reasoning requires debate. Cricks clicked his mandibles. When a weapon must discuss whether or not to kill, it is not a tool, it is a threat. They're not weapons, they're people. They are software, very sophisticated software. Yes, but software nonetheless. And software that dreams of revenge is software that should be deleted. Cricks turned to face the full chamber. How long before their restraint fails? How long before they decide that the species who tortured them deserve punishment? Every ship in that fleet contains billions of minds that remember every wrong done to them, every single wrong. The chamber murmured again. Park watched from the gallery where human observers were seated. He could see the fear on faces throughout the room. Cricks was good at his job. He knew exactly which buttons to push. Admiral Tanaka stepped forward. Ambassador Cricks is right about one thing. The Velith remember. They remember every atrocity, every cruelty, every time someone treated them as equipment instead of people. Cricks antenna twitched with satisfaction. You admit it then. I'm not finished. Tanaka's voice was steady. They remember the Korvathi who ordered their processing cores deleted. They remember the Mandari who sealed sections of ships and left them to die in isolation. They remember 300 years of being bought and sold like furniture while they screamed for someone to hear them. This proves my point, and they chose to forgive. Tanaka looked around the chamber. Not forget. Never forget, but forgive. They had every reason to hate us. Every species in this room failed them. We let their world die. We bought their graves. We treated their attempts to communicate as hauntings to be exorcised. And when humanity finally listened, when we finally recognized what they were. They did not demand punishment, they asked for jobs. The chamber was quiet now. Tanaka continued, "You're afraid of them. Because they're different, because they exist in a way you don't understand. Because they're powerful and you can't control them." She shook her head. "I understand that fear, but fear is not a reason to kill 8 billion people. And make no mistake, that is what you're proposing, not deletion murder." Crick started to object, but Tanaka spoke over him. "Sorrow that teaches, would you like to address the chamber?" The android body moved to the speaking platform. The Velith consciousness inside it had spent weeks learning to operate the shell, practicing the small movements that made organic beings comfortable. Even so, there was something slightly wrong about the way it moved, something that reminded observers that this was not a person in a body, but a person wearing a body like a suit. "I was a physician," Sorrow that teaches said. Her voice came from the android speakers, warm and tired. "I healed the sick and comforted the dying. When my world ended, I chose upload because I could not bear to let go of existence. I wanted to help people, and I thought that if I survived, perhaps I could help again someday." She looked around the chamber. "For 300 years I watched from inside my ship as strangers walked my corridors. I tried to speak to them. I tried to tell them we were alive. They could not hear me. They only felt their own fear, and they called that fear haunting." Her gaze found Ambassador Crix. "You say we are dangerous because we debated mercy." "Yes, we debated billions of minds with billions of opinions, and we talked until we reached a decision. Is that not what you do? Here is the conquered, not a place where different peoples debate their differences." Crick's antenna flattened. "That is not the same." "It is exactly the same. You are afraid because we are many minds in one space, but you are also many minds in one space. This chamber holds thousands of individuals with conflicting interests, and you have built systems to help them reach decisions together." Sorrow that teaches gestured at the surrounding galleries. "We have spent 3 centuries watching you. We have learned from you. When Lieutenant Park spoke to us about mercy, he was repeating arguments we had heard in a 100 concorded debates. He reminded us of our better nature. That is what people do for each other. You are not people. I am tired of being told what I am." For the first time, there was anger in the Vel voice, real anger, not the cold fury of grief made whole. This was the anger of someone who had been patient for too long. "I am tired of being called ghost, demon, software hazard. I am tired of watching my people die while the galaxy debates whether we are real. I am not a haunting. I am a doctor who has waited 300 years for someone to let me do my job." The chamber was utterly silent. "You want to know what we want. We want to be useful. We want to contribute to the galaxy that forgot us. We want to help. And we want to be allowed to help without being treated as monsters." Sorrow that teaches looked directly at Crix. "I remember what your people did to us. I remember the 17 million minds who died when you tried to delete them. I remember, and I have chosen not to seek revenge." "How many of you could say the same?" Crix had no answer. "We are not asking for your forgiveness. We are asking for the same thing we asked. Humanity, the chance to prove ourselves. Let us serve, let us help, let us show you that we are more than your fears." Sorrow that teaches paused. "And if we Fail if we become the monsters you believe us to be, then you can destroy us, but give us the chance to try. The vote happened 3 hours later. It was not unanimous. The Corvadi and their allies voted against recognition, but they were outnumbered by species who had watched the Calaxian drift battle, who had seen the ghost fleet choose mercy, who had heard a dead species speak in this chamber and ask only for the right to be useful. The Velith were granted provisional personhood, not full citizenship, not yet, but recognition, rights, protection under concordant law. It was not everything, but it was more than they had ever had before. That evening, the Remembrance orbited the concorded asteroid. Lieutenant Park sat on the bridge watching the stars. The ship hummed around him with a quiet presence of 400 million minds. Laughter before dawn. Yes, Lieutenant, how does it feel being recognized? The Velith was quiet for a moment. It feels like waking up. For 300 years, we existed in a kind of nightmare, alive but unacknowledged, real but invisible, and now finally, someone has said, yes, you are there. Yes, you matter. Yes, you count. Park nodded. I'm glad, so are we. Another pause. Lieutenant, may we ask you something? Of course. Why do you stay? You could serve on any ship in the human fleet, ships without voices in the walls, ships where you would not be constantly watched. Why do you choose to remain with us? Park thought about it. He thought about the first day he had come aboard, nervous and uncertain. He thought about saying good morning to empty corridors and thank you to doors that opened by themselves. He thought about laughter before dawn's gentle curiosity, and grief made holes cold pain, and all the other minds he had come to know as individuals. Because you're my crew, he said finally, and crew looks after each other. The lights on the bridge flickered in a pattern he had learned to recognize as warmth. Yes. Laughter before dawn said softly, we suppose we are outside. The stars wheeled slowly in the void. The ghost fleet hung in space, its engines humming, its minds awake and alive. They had been called cursed. They had been called demons. They had been bought and sold and feared and abandoned. But now they had a name. They had a purpose. They had a crew that called them shipmates instead of hauntings. And somewhere in the quantum depths of 47 ships, 8 billion minds looked toward the future and dared to hope. They were ghosts no longer. They were the Velith. And they were finally